you have this column out this morning. You argue that this is not the right way for the president to approach housing affordability. Why is that?
I think the first thing you want to do if you want to make affordability better is you want to make sure that at least we're not building fewer homes as a result of any policy change. And my concern, at least if you're talking about preventing institutions from buying new homes, build to rent, things like that, is you're just taking away a source of demand from home builders. And rather than them selling homes to individual home buyers instead, they might just produce fewer homes because right now they're really struggling with profitability and weak demand. And I don't think you want to remove a source of demand. So I think you want to find other ways of facilitating transactions and improving affordability without really going after the home builders.
I always feel like, Conor, when we talk to folks in the home building market, it's a lot of it has to do with available land, buying land, and then dealing with, local markets. We know real estate is such a local marketplace. I feel like it always comes down to more of that versus whether or not institutional investors are buying, especially when they're such a small part of the market.
Right. Like John Burns Research and Consulting has data that says that among the new home builders, new home market, institutions are only about 4% of the market. And they're really buying communities custom built for them. They're not competing with a 33-year-old about to have a kid to buy one-off homes. It's really, we're going to allocate a certain number of homes for institutions. Or in some cases, when the market's weak, like it was in 2022, if home builders are really struggling to offload inventory, it's like, here's a buyer of last resort, so to speak. And that just helps de-risk the industry, where they can keep producing homes, knowing that even if market conditions turn more rockier, there is a buyer out there, even if households walk away.
Yeah, I think that data is really interesting, and I think there's a lot of politics in this too, Conor. I mean, you've written about the politics of rising prices, especially in your home area around Atlanta, and the way that power costs have increased. Maybe this is a way for Republicans to say, we are addressing, ahead of the elections, we are addressing the affordability issue. It seems populist and political at its core.
And I get how a lot of people in both parties see a headline like, keep Blackstone from buying your home. And that sounds compelling, but the facts just don't really back up that they're a major player. Like in Atlanta, they do own a fair number of homes. I think we're the number one market in the country for institutional ownership. But most of these homes were bought in the early 2010s in the wake of the foreclosure crisis. And at that time, there really wasn't much home buying demand at all. And so institutions stepped in to really prevent the foreclosure crisis from getting worse, prevent home values from falling even further, prevent banks from failing. And I think in 2026, we lose sight of that, but they haven't really been a big player in the market in recent years. These are just homes they bought 15 years ago in a very different environment.
I thought Jonathan Miller of Miller Samuel, he was on with Scarlett a little earlier today. He said that part of the issue is that the highest concentration of investment is in the South, where there's already excess supply of homes right now. So even though, and that's where these institutional owners of single-family homes have a high concentration. As Carol mentioned, so much of this is local. This all has to do with local. The issue it comes down to, Conor, is zoning and making sure that people are saying yes in my backyard to upzoning, yes in my backyard to building more dense housing. Is that the only solution here?
I think that's a big part of the solution. And the other one that I've written about recently is that in a normal housing market where we're selling maybe 5 to 5.5 million homes a year, people tend to move from north to south, maybe retirees in Connecticut moving to Florida, people in California moving to Austin. And because resale transactions are down about 25% from normalized levels, that migration flow isn't happening. And that's why the tightest housing market in the country right now is Hartford. And I've got a lot of love for Connecticut. I've got a cousin who lives up there, but I don't think that Connecticut all of a sudden became the hottest housing market in the country. I think just this decline in mobility and migration means that a lot of retirees who might want to leave Connecticut are kind of stuck there, and therefore their homes aren't hitting the market. And that keeps younger people in Connecticut from buying homes that maybe would have been available if people could move to Florida the way they could in the 2010s.
So, Conor, is it more not about an affordability issue? I mean, I was trying to look at some numbers, and I think it's about 66 to 67% of Americans actually own some kind of property or home ownership. I think it's 85 to 90 million Americans. I mean, so is it not an affordability issue? Is it more about people not moving around, that the houses are there, it's just maybe not where they need to be? And you can understand why home builders might be hesitant to build homes, because at some point, all the baby boomers, forgive me, a lot of them in my family, they're not going to be around anymore, and there's going to be home supply.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of the solution here, Conor. I mean, you've written about the politics of rising prices, especially in your home area around Atlanta, and the way that power costs have increased. Maybe this is a way for Republicans to say, we are addressing, ahead of the elections, we are addressing the affordability issue. It seems populist and political at its core.
I think to your point, it's a really regional issue right now. There
Okay.
are plenty of homes to buy in Florida and Texas, and a real shortage in the Northeast and the Midwest. And so you have this two-tier market where the places where builders build have plenty of homes. The places where builders typically don't, where zoning's harder, to your point, have a real shortage. And so I think you want to address both sides. To me, the elegant way is to try to find policies that will get transactions back to normalized levels, which that won't lead to more building in Connecticut, but that'll make it easier for homeowners in Connecticut who want to retire to the South to move out and free up that inventory for people in the North. And then to your point, people in the North just have to create zoning policies that allow for more homes to be built. And it's a hard fight that'll take time, but that's just part of the solution as well.
Yeah, and that's a local fight, as everybody knows who've been to the ballot box or followed local politics. Hey, Conor, before we let you go, when the actual publicly traded home builders that do the home building in this country, how much of it is on them versus the smaller developers, like the guy on my block, for example, who's bought 3 different homes and rehab them and flip those homes. How much is about that supply versus those institutional home builders?
I think the publicly traded builders that, again, are predominantly in the South and West, they're doing their job. They're trying to build homes. They're operating at profit margins that they don't want to be operating at. And it's the smaller builders that are dominating the Northeast that have a harder time accessing capital. They're struggling with cost and things like that. So again, I do think it's different issues. Mm-hmm. And so it's probably more of a local regional issue to address the true shortage of where it currently exists rather than a national solution where, again, publicly traded builders already are doing their best and they're struggling. And so they're not the bad guys here.